Happy New Year, and welcome to session 4 of our year-end reset. I'm Dr. Janyne Emsick, and I am joined by my friend Tisha Parker Kemp. And Tisha today is going to introduce our fourth R, reignite. See, we have reflected, reframed, and reimagined, and now it's time to talk about what derails even the best plans. Because knowing what to do is one thing, actually doing it when life gets hard, well, that is where momentum comes from. And Tisha is going to lead us through this critical piece.
Thank you, Janyne. When I think about this whole concept of reigniting and momentum and motivation, when I think about it from the adult learning perspective, it really dovetails well with this extrinsic, intrinsic motivation, what propels us to continue with momentum and what kind of derails us or stops us from progressing. And in the work that I do, goals, it's part of helping people to not only set goals, but to do it strategically so that they're setting themselves up for success. Goals don't fail because we lack motivation necessarily. We have the desires and the ambitions, and so they don't typically fail because of deficits in those areas. They usually fail because we don't manage the derailers. There are barriers, things that get in our way, and we either don't have the strategies or the tactics to know how to navigate around them, or we may lack the courage to push through. And so some of the common derailers and some of the barriers that I experience in the work that I do is, it can be a long list, and some that people are already familiar with, like imposter syndrome, this whole notion of they're going to find out that I don't really know all that they think I know. So we put this pressure on performing in a certain way to meet others' expectations. And this usually is a bar that's set so high that we don't do the thing. There's perfectionism, where we know perfectionism doesn't exist. I hear this from people all the time. I'm a perfectionist. Well, perfectionism is setting an unrealistic expectation that nothing is ever going to go wrong and I'm going to know the answers to absolutely everything. And I remember a time when my dad bought a set of encyclopedias. And I was always told I was really smart in school. So I had this expectation that I should know the answer when somebody asks me. And he brought home this box of encyclopedias. And I thought, oh my goodness, I was just a kid. I'm going to read this whole set and I'm going to know everything. And then I'm going to be perfect in school and I'll know the answers to every test that comes across. And I think when we keep that into our adulthood, it has this negative effect on holding us back. So that can be a real barrier. The distractions, the people pleasing, I'd mentioned one to you, this tall poppy syndrome. And this is something I think it depends on, the societal norms. But here in Canada, it tends to be something that is part of our experience, that there is this equity. There's this, we want everybody to be at the same level, and our social programs have that same sort of underlying principles. And this tall poppy syndrome can rear its ugly head when I want to stand up and have this level of confidence, but I don't want to be the tall poppy. Right? I want to be at the same level as everybody else because that's kind of the community and the expectation. And when we hold ourselves back from being that tall poppy, it's usually because we're afraid of that poppy clipper. There's somebody that's going to come along and try to cut us down or diminish or pull us back down into that same level as everybody else. So it's different for everybody. There's, some of these barriers that I had mentioned, but in some cases it's just, I'm overwhelmed. I don't know where to start. I have no structure and I've got, the 1,000 things that I want to accomplish. And we know that the neuroscience behind that is when we get into those moments of that high stress, the amygdala clicks, we have this fight or flight, the cortisol spikes, the oxygen then removes itself from our extremities and it goes to our vital organs, into our core. And what that typically means in the work that I do is that prefrontal cortex is now overloaded and there's no oxygen to supply it. And we forget what we're going to say, and all of this inner dialogue starts to happen, and the brain gets into this energy conservation. And this resistance is completely normal. It's not failure. It's something that is part of the human experience. And I had an experience very similar to this as an audience member. Today, we had our booster participants offer their capstone, and there was a tech woe. And that can create this anxiety, this fight or flight. Oh my goodness, this is not how I was hoping that this whole situation would go. But as soon as we allow that progression of, okay, I'm going to hit reset, get the oxygen pumping, and that person just got into the zone and delivered a beautiful presentation. And allowing that anxiety and the derailing and those barriers and inner dialogue things that happen for a lot of us, it really allows you to perform at a higher level, but to be there with the level of energy that other people kind of need from you. And I'm curious about the work that you do and this coaching and the personal resilience, what insights you can offer there, Janyne.
Yeah, so I'm going to get up and grab something because I've thought multiple times in this conversation that I should have this because I normally have it in my hand, but it's my brain.
Mm.
And because you just did a great kind of introduction of the neuroscience. So here's my beautiful brain.
Love
And I
that.
like to say, so if we look at kind of some of this colored stuff in here, that's kind of pointing to the amygdala, the limbic system that is part of our fight or well, it's what grounds our fight or flight response. And then your prefrontal cortex is this part of your brain up here. So literally, this is about the size of your brain. And your prefrontal cortex is about as thick as a credit card. So it looks like it's huge here, but it actually is very delicate. And I like to say, if your limbic system is arm wrestling with your prefrontal cortex, with your executive functioning, your clarity, your focus, your strategic, your decision making, if your limbic system is arm wrestling with that logic, the limbic system will win every single time. It's that strong. That's that survival technique. And your brain thrives on clarity. And it may go to the clarity that says, I will fail, or the clarity, I don't belong in this room, or that if I stand out, they're going to think this about me and they're going to clip me off. I love that. I've never heard of that before. The tall poppy syndrome. And all it takes is making some choices to reroute those physiological responses. Back in 2020, at the beginning of the year, we went through our annual best year ever process and with Michael Hyatt in full focus. You hear me referencing that because it's just been so transformational in our personal and our business planning and success and accomplishing of goals. And so we, at the beginning of 2020, we set our goals, and we started the year with this clear roadmap. And was it 6 weeks later, the pandemic hit and just turned everything on its head. And I had signed up for, at the beginning of the year, before all that happened, monthly coaching, monthly group coaching, and tuned in October. And I was inconsistent until then. Tuned in October, and he started this webinar with, "How many of you feel like you have failed because the goals you wrote in January aren't done?" And many of the hands went up, including mine. And it was this discouragement, this reality that, I can't do this. I can't have consistency. All of those things we tell ourselves about why things went wrong. I was right. Believe it or not, your brain would rather hear that you're right about something that really isn't true than about the possibility of something better. And so Michael Hyatt said, I'll never forget this. He doesn't remember saying it. I've asked him. I said, here's the story. Do you remember? He goes, oh, I did. Oh, that's pretty good. So he said, you have 3 months left in the year. There is so much that can be accomplished in 3 months. How do you want to finish well? And that's a question of encouragement as opposed to discouragement. And it changed everything. It wasn't about perfection. It was about year-end momentum. And so I'm curious, Tisha. I know you're going to be taking us to a momentum map that will help us work through these derailers and gain what I like to call action for traction that makes our goals and our dreams come to life.
You're making me think about a couple of tools. Yes, to the momentum map. I'll get to that in a second, but what you're also making me think about is the level of complexity and the cognitive load, particularly around this time of year when we're
Mm.
into the early part of 2026 and we're trying to figure out how do we keep the momentum going, how do we get momentum and then keep it going. The momentum map I'll get to in a second, but the other one, the really uber simplistic approach that we have is the power of seven. And when we think about the power of seven, if we are feeling in the moments that we're overwhelmed in the middle of the day, I've got 8,000 windows open, I've got a bunch of emails, and the things are all over the place, what can I do in the next 7 seconds to hit that reset on my momentum? And it might be I just close all the windows that I have open, just completely close everything, all the browsers. And in that 7 seconds, we're hitting that reset. Now, what can I do in the next 7 minutes? In the next 7 minutes, maybe I can create a priority list for myself. What am I going to do for the rest of today? Then what am I going to do for the next 7 hours, 7 days, 7 weeks? And you can put this out as far as you'd like to, 7 years. But in that simplistic mode, it just kind of gives us a chance to reset. And you can use this in any format. What can I do in the next 7 seconds to build that momentum for getting a fitness program? We all feel like this is overwhelming. Well, in the next 7 seconds, I can look at my calendar and see when today am I going to move? And maybe that's doing a 2-minute plank. It doesn't have to be this overwhelming. And I think this is part of being driven and passionate and really excited about the future is we lose momentum because we feel like things are just so far away from us. And this is where the momentum map comes in. So the momentum map is broken down into 3 different components. We want to acknowledge the micro wins. So we want to have these acknowledgement of what are we winning at right now? And that helps us with that dopamine, that intrinsic motivation. I know that there's something I'm winning at. I'm getting it right. And you've probably heard, I know you're in this neuroscience world, the visualization, the reticular activating system. When we actually have those small wins that lead us into those longer games, it keeps the momentum going. So not losing sight of the tiny little wins and the micro wins that we're experiencing. The second part of that is the accountability. And we talked about this in a previous video. We partner our participants in our programs and in our Courageous membership group because that connection increases. And these are stats from the American Society of Training and Development. We know that the follow through is increased by 65%, which is huge. It's absolutely massive. And so that third part of it is then establishing the routines, that predictable rhythm, stabilizing the behavior when those moments of stress happen. And so it's a 30-day momentum map. And this 30 days is really broken down into what are the routines? What are we doing in the morning? What are we doing in the evening? What are we doing in our weekly reset? And we use this in our Courageous group with the quarterlies. And we talked about that in a previous session as well. That 30-day, if you were to carve out independently, how do I keep that intrinsic motivation? That 30-day momentum map. What am I focusing on in week 1? What am I focusing on in week 2? And doing that for the 3rd and 4th weeks as well. And really starting to get clarity on who's my partner in this? Who am I wanting to be accountable to? And making sure that it's not a yes person, right? We want somebody that's going to hold our feet to the fire and say, did you do the thing? And if not, how can we support and help you get unstuck and keep that momentum going?
It's interesting. One of the things I've learned about myself, it's so funny because I'm great at starting up systems and figuring them out, and my strength with follow through is really takes effort. And I found that I'm socially accountable. So when I am doing something, I am best and I have actually created Facebook groups with people who would have similar goals. And by leading the group, I don't have to walk my talk. and it creates this accountability. It's been a fascinating learning for myself, but that power of relationships. So, Tisha, first of all, I love the power of sevens. What can I do in the next 7 seconds? What can I do in the next 7 minutes? What can I do in the next 7 days? What can I do in the next 7 months? We could go to the next 7 years. Is that right? I mean, that's great. And then this momentum map. And the more that we create small steps, and James Clear's work on this is just so fantastic on, creating our habits that reframe how we see our identity, is just fantastic. And so, as we wrap up our 4-part series, you have done the work. You have reflected on the previous year. You've done your 3Ds, you know your regrets, you've reframed beliefs that are not helpful and keep you stuck, you have reimagined your goals, and now it's time to protect them. Your derailers are real, but they're not more powerful than your commitment. So your next step, go ahead and create your 30-day momentum map. Build in those micro wins. Who will be your accountability partner? What are your routines? I call my morning routine my A game. And so what is that A game I need in the morning, from when I get out of bed, when I exercise, when I sit down in a chair for having a quiet time, going and reflecting and creating my daily big three? What is that A game for you, that daily routine? And I started with doing just this much, and then I kept stacking habits on top of that basic routine. And so you don't need a perfect plan. In fact, keep it simple. As I think we mentioned last time, make those first steps so easy you fall over them, so that you get that initial feeling of a win, of success. You feel the dopamine in your brain. You don't need a perfect plan. You just need the next aligned step. And that step is waiting for you. So click the link in the show notes below to download your momentum map. And for today, we'll go ahead and have all 4 of the worksheets from our year-end reset there for you to download at one time. And go ahead and start 2026 strong. We are cheering you on. Tisha, thank you so much.
Thank you, Janyne. It's been an absolute pleasure.